All right,
We're rolling now. We're rolling.
Rolling and action. So, welcome to 40 Fit Fu, episode 6-1. I'm Oscar and this is Mimi.
Yes, we are here every Tuesday at 7:45. Not necessarily with a tiger fork, but we'll get to that later. But we're here every Tuesday at 7:45 to give you some fitness tips and tricks to kind of help you along with your Kung Fu and Tai Chi, especially for those of you who are over 40.
That's us.
That is us.
All right, so today we thought that we would tackle the most important stance, martial arts stance in traditional martial arts, and that is the riding horse stance. Also known as Saping Ma in Cantonese. Ma Bo is another one. But basically, if you're not familiar with Kung Fu, it's like as if you're riding a horse. And if
you've ever ridden a horse, it's kind of like you're riding a horse.
Yeah, exactly. Your feet are out, your knees are wide, and you're sitting back into the stance.
Pretty much.
And so there's a lot of really great benefits to the traditional riding horse stance in martial arts. A lot of it that I find benefit from is almost like a standing meditation. We also talk about like chi development. Obviously, like strength is another big one. But there's a ton of great benefits to it. It's not just to strengthen the legs.
Right, absolutely not. Especially those of you who do Wallong Kung Fu, as you know, the very first normal we do, we're very comfy in that position for a while doing our breathing, right? So it's definitively like what we call, when our students start, the ABCs of Kung Fu. So without the stances, especially the riding horse stance, without your stance, you really cannot really do Kung Fu to its full capacity.
Right.
Like this is not a step to be skipped. And I've noticed that in the classes, especially those of us who get a little bit of a later start, you know, like kids that are still able to squat, rock bottom and everything, they usually kind of get into the motion. But I've noticed that adults have some challenges kind of getting in what we would consider an optimal Kung Fu horse stance. So optimal meaning that you're not too wide, you're not too narrow, you're at the right distance, and that you're able to kind of sit back into your stance without
That's a good stance.
leaning, without without your knees buckling. And for those of you who from the side, I often notice like we have a lot of hip issues with being able to tuck the tail as if you're sitting versus like kind of butt punching the wall or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, so that's kind of some of the things that I've noticed. That while we're in class, we can't sit there and really dissect it and kind of get into the details of how we can fix it. So we thought this would be a great episode for you.
Exactly. And then us, as instructors in martial arts, we are able to see sometimes and say, that doesn't look right. And if you are experiencing whatever it is that you do, it could be, I don't know, playing a piano, right? If you've got the right ear for it, then you can say, that doesn't quite sound right. And for the riding horse stance, it's the same. We can look at it and go, that doesn't quite look right. But we want to talk about kind of what the main faults in the horse stance are, and then how you can possibly address it. So let's go through, what's your number one thing that you see?
Well, starting kind of from head to toe, the biggest thing is, keeping the back nice and tall and straight, because the tendency will be, well, if I'm here and I want to I'll go side for the camera, if I'm here and as I keep getting lower, if this isn't working quite right, I feel like I'm going lower by bending forward, right? So that my back kind of doesn't stay upright.
Okay, so first thing is, there's a difference. There's a difference between keeping your back straight and having your back be vertical, right? So if you're not able, let's address each one. If you're not able to keep your back straight, that's kind of a posture issue, right? You're not able to like have a good position. We've talked about this in the past, but in essence, I think the best thing for people to start doing is to get separation between their ear and their shoulder, and not necessarily thinking of pinching their shoulder back, but instead of creating space. And so we have an episode where we talk about breathing and creating space. So trying to have this position first. So that is for your straight spine. The second fault that we said is that kind of tilting forward. So they're able to keep their spine straight, but not necessarily vertical. I see this a lot in people who are like, I'm gonna work hard and push myself lower into a stance. And this is compensating for something. Your back is straight, but you're leaning forward. You're probably running out of room in the hips. And so probably the next joint we need to address is the hips. And there's a ton of different ways to do this. We've gone through a ton of joint mobility stuff here.
Really? We've gone through joint mobility here?
We've done a lot of joint mobility stuff here. I think the best place to start is to make sure that you test and assess yourself with a joint circle of the hip. And what most people are lacking for a horse stance is hip flexion, because they're loading their hips under flexion, and then they're lacking this kind of hip abduction, which is kind of like opening up into a split, the separating of the hips. But in addition to that, as you go low into the stance, and Mimi's got a very good horse stance, she's got very good internal rotation of the hips as you go down, which is able to create space to keep this straight. And that's not so bad, you know, I've worked on it. So what I noticed when I first started doing martial arts, because I was doing it as I was older, is that I would lean forward. I'm running out of space. I didn't understand, but I was like, I keep moving forward, and it's just I was running out of space in my hips.
All right, so how do we create the space?
So first is 90-90. So first is hip circles. I think you should do that every single day, right? We've gone through what a hip controlled articular rotation looks like. Trying not to compensate. You can do it from every position, standing, right? You can do it from the floor, right? From a kneeling position. This will maintain the health of your joints, and it's also a great way to assess your joints on a day-to-day basis. If you want to expand your range of motion, we need to work on internal and external rotation of the joint, and the best way to do that is the 90-90 stretch. 90-90 basically just means that you're creating 90-degree angles, and so Mimi's front shin and back thigh are parallel to each other. If there was a laser shooting from her knee all the way to her ankle bone, this is shooting straight, and then the back thigh is parallel, and then the front thigh and back shin are parallel to each other, and that is the 90-90 stretch. So the awesome thing with this is, as she's facing forward, she's working external rotation of the hip. So the way we would coach this is think, there's a race, and you want your belly button to win the race, not your face to win the race, or your chest. So as she moves forward, I want her belly button to reach over the mid-shin first, not the face or the chest. And that's going to create a stretch in the front of the hip, so you're getting external rotation.
And if you can do that, let us know. That would be amazing.
Yeah, what I find is a lot of people, and listen, it's not necessarily wrong, it's just that you're compensating. A lot of people like to just fold forward. So Mimi's pretty flexible, and they just kind of like just hang out here. That's fine, listen, you do you, boo-boo.
But we're not creating space.
But you're not creating space in the joint, and that won't necessarily help you in your riding horse stance. And I know it from experience because I see a lot of people who are here in this position, and they don't know how to create space, so they just dip forward and they hang out here, and there's no improvement in their hip external rotation.
I'm like, why can't my saving mom get better?
Right. So focus on this, and I think we can spend a little bit more time on this as well.
Yeah, I think we also did an episode not too long ago on some 90.
Hip, internal rotation of the back hip, you're creating space in the joint. The more space that you're able to create in the joint, the more control you'll have over that joint, and then you can cement that and hit save with a riding horse stance, or we can move into the bear sit.
Bear sit.
This is called the bear sit. So really, the way that you want to be able to get into it is, if she were in her 90-90, just don't move the heels from that position, don't slide them all over the place, and be right there. And that's it. That's a great way to do it. So the reason that I like the 90-90 to the bear sit is you're practicing creating space, but now this is basically like a horse stance unloaded. She's got her back straight, so we're working on that, and now we can create the strength here. So what I would have Mimi do is place her hands on the outside of her foot, grabbing onto the ankles, and the elbows and knees are kind of close in together. Actually, I apologize. We want the opposite of that. We want the elbows on the inside of the knee. We want the elbows on the inside of the knee because we're trying to create space going out. So taking a big breath in, bracing the abs, and then letting tension build from the midsection and spilling out towards the rest of the body. We call that irradiation. You're irradiating a lot more tension. And then you're going to squeeze your knee into your elbow and your elbow into the knee, creating what's called a progressive angle isometric load. You're doing
that's fancy.
It's called a pale or a rail, and this is from Dr. Spina's FRC
Just
system.
push against your elbows.
But basically creating an isometric contraction. You're driving into each other without moving, and that's creating a load. You hold that for about 10 seconds, and then the opposite is don't use your elbows, but move your knee away from your elbow and try to create space in the opposite. So now all these muscles are working to open up into your stance. And then you relax in your newfound range of motion. What you may find though is some of you don't have the posture that Mimi has, so you may need to support by going ahead and putting your butt up against the wall. Just careful with that. Help with your riding horse stance, and then we can address a bunch of other stuff. You do need a little bit of ankle mobility, but I would actually go to the next joint down the line. You need to be able to load the knee under knee flexion. So there's other stuff that we can do there.
Yeah, so that might be part 2 of this video, because obviously we also have a Kung Fu pod on routine and, you know, taking that approach, which is like the real Kung Fu approach. But this is really for those of you that are having kind of issues getting into that range of motion, just not being able to say, well, I want to be able to look like, you know, I'm in a good Kung Fu stance versus, you know, leaning over, or just feeling like you're in standing horse stance, which is not what you want.
So there's one last thing,
Right.
is and I take this from strength training, you know, I tell my trainers when I'm teaching them on how to coach people, is like, if you look at something, a strength movement, and it doesn't look right, the first rule is that it's too much load. Because this is a riding horse stance and it's your body weight, it's your to hold yourself in that position. Only you, young Skywalker, can know where you're at on this journey. So you may need both. You may not be strong enough and you may not be mobile enough. And if that's the case, get your mobility first. Train that the right way, because that will build strength along with the mobility. But if you've got the mobility, then we got to work on the strength. And I think a good way, an easy way to train your strength is just holding onto something to take the load off. So if, let's say, Mimi's not able to hold her horse in, she's like leaning forward, I would give her a little bit of, or she's falling back, I would have her hold on to a partner. So I'm giving her a good base of support. And I would say, all right, keep working on getting that spine straighter. There you go. Now I feel the load. She's basically I'm taking 30% of her load off of that, which will improve her stance. And then what you do is, over time, you increase the load by removing the amount of assistance that you have. I mean, that's just basic. Once you say it out loud, it's like, oh, that's complete common sense. But sometimes common sense is not so common, right? Because we try to like keep pushing ourselves here, as opposed to spending some time working on the things that we need to spend time on.
That's right.
So that is, I can talk about riding horse stance forever. I can talk about anything forever, right?
Yeah, but we won't do that.
So we won't do that.
So thank you for joining us. I think that's a good stopping point, because next week we can kind of address maybe, here and down because there are a lot of things with the foot position. We didn't
Right.
even get to all of the major points of issues that I see with the students, but I think the biggest one is that leaning, is that getting into that riding horse stance and being able to kind of get to that position. And then once we get to that position, we can talk about the knees wavering, the feet
Right.
turning in and out, the feet, the shoes, and all of that good stuff. So we'll talk about all of that next week. That is our dinner bell.
Dinner bell, that means,
Ding,
oh, I'm
ding,
definitely
ding.
done. Listen, all right, thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate you being here every week, right?
Yes, it was really cool. We had a Kung Fu event this weekend. We saw a lot of 40 Fit Fuers out there, so shout out to all of you who've been watching. Please drop us a line, let us know. And if you haven't seen the Wallum Marshmallow Roaster, check that out on our YouTube channel. Also, it's on our Facebook
Wow,
page.
supplies
It's
last.
pretty amazing if you're interested in getting the Wallum Marshmallow Roaster. That's why Oscar has the Tiger Fort today. So, thank you guys for joining us every Tuesday, 7:45, 40 Fit Food. Share it with your friends, ask questions, let us know how we're doing.
Well, we're doing awesome, but still let us know what you think.
All right,